Welcome back. Episode 4 of the S52 E34 series. So we got the motor ready to go in, and I said the next episode we'll probably be putting it in. Well, since we're waiting on a few gaskets, we can't forget about the rest of the driveline. I don't know why I haven't done any of this yet. I've been procrastinating it. But in this video, we will be totally refreshing the ZF. So that means all the seals, all the shifter thingies, stuff like that. We're gonna be putting in the 323 LSD. So auto 525s come with 410s. You don't want a 410 with a 5-speed, way too high of a ratio. So we got the 323 LSD here, and yes, it looks like it came from the bottom of the ocean. Midwest car things. And we got the Driveshaft here, which will be getting a CSB, a giubo, and the bushing in the other end that I don't know the name of, that hopefully we can do. It's kind of a pain to get to, but yeah, so let's just get right into it, huh? Alright, before we do anything, we gotta get the old fluid out of it so we don't get fluid dripping all over the place. So as always with a transmission or a diff, open the fill plug first, because if you can't get this open and you drain it, then good luck. It might be a little tricky to get to with the thing on jack stands. Gotta kind of hug it. Now hopefully this transmission doesn't look like the ZF from the 540, because that had no fluid in it, and I'm really hoping. I know when I transported this thing I dripped some fluid out of it, so I know it's got something in here, but alright, perfect. It had fluid, so, and it actually looks like pretty new fluid at that, so that's good. Alright, so we're on my disaster of a workbench here. We got the ZF up here. If you look at this thing, you'll see we got some shiny caps here, and we got some new blue here. So the detents have actually been done on this. I have a local guy that hooks me up and does them for me. It's the one thing I kind of wanted to do for video purposes, and then I looked on the internet and realized that there's a lot of people that have really good videos on these. So I didn't really feel like buying the tools myself. I didn't feel like learning myself. I have a lot of stuff to do with this car and not a lot of time because I got to get this thing to LA. So I didn't want to deal with it, so I had him do it. So I say we start with the shift shaft seal. So we got to get this old selector rod off, and this selector rod has a lot of play in it, so good thing we're replacing that. I get this little C-clip off. I actually got a brand new pin of that as well, so we will not have to reuse that. There's our old selector rod. Now if you can maybe see in there, the foam seal is absolutely destroyed. So this plays the biggest part in how your shifter feels. A lot of people overlook this, but if this thing is bad, your car will not shift good. It gives us access to the shift shaft seal, which is right here. Now this, you basically have to use an assortment of picks and little flatheads to get it out. It's a little tricky, and you want to not gouge everything else around it. This thing will break all your pins, or your picks. There we go. Oh, and a little bit of fluid. I would say this is probably one of the harder seals to get out of this transmission. The other ones shouldn't be nearly this bad. Fun fact, I spent about an hour today looking for this. This for some reason came in its own shipment early, and I set it aside in a box, forgot to take it out, and could not find it. Get some oil on it. That's what the manual says to do. Alright, 16 mil. And there you go. Alright, so now that that's done, we'll go ahead and put the new selector on. Design is updated a little bit. It's got a different C-clip now. And yeah, but you could see the foam in this one versus this one. There's no foam left. So this is your shifter feel right here. Now I gotta get the C-clip in the right orientation. Well, we just gotta get the C-clip on. There we go. Oh, it popped out without me even looking. And there we have it. New selector rod, and you can just see there's no play in that compared to before. I mean, before it would just wiggle all over. That is very firm. There we go. So for the output shaft, we have to go ahead and pull the flange out. 36mm deep well is what you need. They say thin wall. I definitely don't need a thin wall for this, so I had to go out and buy this. This is like $22. These are ridiculously expensive. There we go. Now the manual says for this motor oil, for this trans fluid. So got some D4 ATF here, which is what we will be using. And I guess I'll just coat this seal a little bit. I don't know, I've never done this, but since I just so happen to conveniently have an E34 manual here, I'm going to follow it. Okay. Oh man. It went too far in already. Got it pretty straight here, so now I'm going to use the 36mm wherever I put it. For the flange, it says to coat it with Loctite 242 on basically the threads of this and the face here. And I plan on maybe doing that, but I actually have some of this Curl K2, which is what the old G260s on the E30s called for this output flange. And you basically would put it all on the splines here. And this, you probably can't see because I got most of it off, actually had a brownish, like vanilla color to it, dried up, which is old Curl K2. So this was originally sealed with Curl K2. So I'm going to keep that going. I'm going to put some Curl K2 on the splines here. And then I think I will mix that with the thread locker on the nut. So you want to make sure you hit your seal in far enough, because if you don't, then it'll hit the output flange and it'll rub on it and it could possibly destroy it. I'm going to mix a little thread locker with some curl and thread locker the nut, if I can find it, with thread locker like that. And I'm going to thread locker the back side of the nut itself and a little bit more in. So you first torque this down to 140 foot-pounds, then you loosen it, and then you put it to 89 foot-pounds. I don't know why. I doubt it even really matters, but I will follow that. I have to get up on top of this thing. Woo! Man, I'm gonna have to stand on it. Dude, there's no way this is getting torqued to 140. Unless, maybe let me put it on the floor and see. Oh my God. Ah, I got it. Ah. Okay. That was difficult. Now we loosen and retighten to 89 foot-pounds. I don't know why, but it's what we do. There we go. It is torqued. And now onto the input shaft seal. Alright, this needs to be cleaned up. Yeah, I think it's coming. See, maybe that bottom part popped out, so now I can get a pick in there. Maybe a screwdriver even. There we go. Easy enough. So there's the old one. Brand new Cortico. Oh, that doesn't look right. Oh no. That is obviously not the correct seal. Usually I check real OEM to reference numbers. For some reason I went strictly by the parts catalog, and they sent me what is called an output or an input shaft seal, but it's clearly not this trans. I don't know what it is, So I went on Real OEM, and sure enough, I found the actual part number for the actual seal I need, and it's not the number I got. So I'm gonna have to wait. Worldpac doesn't have it, so I have to wait a few days. So that really bothers me because I hate not being able to finish a job, but we're still waiting on other things, so it's not like this is hanging us up any more than the rest of the stuff is. So hopefully I can get this in here ASAP. So we finally got our hands on the seal. I had to order this from BMW because I didn't want to wait on an online store and couldn't get it locally by any places because apparently only BMW makes this. There's no like aftermarket ones, like all the other seals are Cortico or whatever. And that's kind of annoying because this was 45 bucks or $44, and this seal didn't really leak. I regret this because this was just a waste of money at this point and a nuisance that set me back. So I got it anyway though, and I made the mistake of falling victim to wanting this trans to be perfect, so I also grabbed both of these. This is a brand new input shafts tube and a clutch fork. So the Bentley manual actually tells you that these are wear items that are supposed to be replaced every clutch job, and normally I wouldn't do those. I never even knew you were supposed to, but the existing ones off this car looked horrible. Like, this is super corroded and rusty, and definitely some wear on the nubs there, and definitely some wear on where the slave goes in and the pivot. And then this one has a lot of gouging on it and a lot of corrosion and pitting, and they honestly just both look really bad. So there's a side-by-side of them. So I bit the bullet, 115 bucks for both of these from the dealer. Again, two items here that are not offered aftermarket, so we had to bite the bullet. Alright, I got a little punch here. So now I'm going to try to go in. I'm going to use the thicker end. Very even. New guide tube goes on. There's no wrong way to do this. It's symmetrical. So pop that on. Alright, the guide tube is on. Got to go ahead and get out the old pivot pin, which is nice and cracked and a little flattened. Not too bad, but this is another one of those things that is commonly misconceived in the community. A lot of aftermarket companies jumped on the fact that you can upcharge people for brass or metal. Brass is softer than this. Those will mushroom and destroy themselves before these do. These last, what, 30 years? So don't bother, just get plastic. Nice and flat and misshapen compared to the new one. I'm gonna go ahead and use a 15 mil deep well because then it'll ride on the outside of this. So when you hammer it in, you don't want to hammer it in by the edge, obviously, because then you're basically wearing it. Alright, the pin is fully seated. Now it's time to put the new fork on with the new clip. The clip goes in the little groove on the pin there. Just like that. So now the fork's in, the pin is on it, and now brand new Sachs throwout bearing. So the manual tells you to grease the contact points, which would be these right here, and then obviously where this is going to ride. So the later model cars after 92 use a plastic sleeve on the throwout bearing, so you do not grease the sleeve, you just have to grease the contact points. You want the flat ends to be like this, vertical, so up and down, because that is what the shaft rides on. So now, everything in the bell housing is taken care of. So the drain and the fill plugs are tapered, so there's no crush washers, there's no high torque. 37 foot-pounds is all we need. So I'm going to pull this one out. Alright, 37. So to make my life easier, since I know this takes more than 1 quart, I'm just going to dump it in on an angle. D4 ATF Redline, best stuff for these ZFs. ATF oil is what this one says. These ZFs are similar to like the E34 power steering. Sometimes they tell you to take MTL. It's kind of just depends on the year, I guess, or the model. So D4 ATF I've always had good luck with in these cars. I think it shifts nice. So that's what I go with. All right, filled till it overflows. There we go. This ZF is fully refreshed. So this thing is good to go, ready to go in the car. Let's go ahead and continue on to the rest of the driveline components. So onto the drive shaft. To start with the drive shaft, we are going to do this centering guide little bushing that's at the giubo side. This should be interesting. I've never done this before. So after a long time and a lot of attempts of different things, I finally went and got my pilot bearing puller and caved and went and rented a slide hammer because I noticed that the pilot bearing puller could grip it and there was no way it was coming out without a slide hammer. So now it's starting to come, so we should be able to get it with a couple yanks here. There it is. So add this to jobs I wish I never started. I might as well have just left this. It probably wasn't that bad. And the trouble that it took to get this out wasn't worth it. But it's out, so now let's get the new one in. Open end outward. It's supposed to hang out 4.5 millimeters. We're at about 6 right now. That'll do it. There you go. Hanging out 4.5 millimeters. The new bushing. Never done this before. I would probably never do it again. Was not worth the pain, I bet. It's time for the center support bearing. And before you do this, you want to mark the drive shaft so you don't lose the balance on it. I usually use Sharpie for this, and Sharpie doesn't stick well. So I'm going to go ahead and use Alpine White touch-up paint because I don't have any more Alpine White cars. So might as well put this to use. Alright, it's marked. Not very good, but still marked. And now there is a 17 mil bolt in here that we have to loosen, and that's basically what holds it together. And then from there we should be able to split it. Sometimes it's pretty hard to split. You really got to fight with it. So we'll see how this one does. Nope, it's actually 19. And usually it's best to counter hold it with a pipe wrench. This usually actually works pretty well, because otherwise it's pretty hard to loosen that with the whole thing kind of loose like this. Oh yeah, super rusty in there. So now we are back to just the bearing. There we go. Old rusty inner center support bearing. New center support bearing going on. I'm gonna get a socket and hammer it down. Find our lines. And now it's time for the easiest part of the drive shaft. We're gonna just put the flex disc on real quick, and then we can wrap up the drive shaft, and then it's diff time. Then we'll go and we'll pull the old diff out of the car, which hopefully doesn't give us too many issues. So I filmed the giubo installation, but I omitted those clips because I did it wrong. So I thought that the arrow on the giubo points to which direction the bolt is supposed to insert, but after looking at the Bentley manual, I see here that all the bolts insert from the back towards the engine, and the nuts are all on the engine side. The arrow points towards the flange. So you can see here, arrow, flange arm, and then on that side it would be arrow that way towards the flange arm. So that's how you orient it, but the bolts all go from the back. So I did that wrong, so I just figured I'd update you guys on how to do it the right way. And there we have it, our fully serviced drive shafts. We got a brand new CSB, a center bushing, and a giubo. CV we're not doing. Those are expensive as hell, and this car showed no signs of it being bad. I've rarely ever seen these actually go bad, so not necessary. So now let's head under the car and let's drop that diff. Welcome back underneath the E34. A job I've done far too many times that I really hate because BMW really screwed us. So first we gotta get the axles off, and they are fastened with 8mm hexes, which just love to strip. So this is basically where you just cross your fingers, you hammer all the Allens in there tight, and you hope for the best. So not a good start at all. So I ran out of SD card, and I've been sitting here fighting for probably 2 hours. These are also C's that most of them are stripping. So you can see here we have a triple square, which is like a tool that you would probably never see unless you own throwing stars, because this is how you get the bolts out of the back of the throwing stars. And I've been hammering this, and I've been using this impact driver to start them. So I got the passenger side, all of them came out without stripping. Most of them almost stripped, but I got them. This side, I got 3 out, and 3 are completely rounded. So the early models have a weird sensor. What the hell? It's safety wired on here. Usually they mount right on the diff. These have like a longer wire. I've mastered the art of this, man. Okay,
going fast, going fast.
A little fast. Uh-oh. The bracket.
Alright, come on.
I'm using the shittiest pliers in the goddamn arsenal.
You don't have an arsenal. You have 2 or 3 tools. Usable tools.
I don't even know. There we go, I broke it. Okay, I'm coming back. One hand on the jack, one hand on the diff ear, until the top of the back of the diff clears the subframe, right? Then you bring it this way. You tip it on the jack, and it slides down the jack like a ramp. Check it. Boom. Look at that. I've only done this 15 times.
Great work.
So now it's time to get the new LSD prepped and in. So luckily this thing doesn't appear to be leaking anywhere, so I don't have to do any resealing. Dropping diffs is easy on this car anyway, so if later down the road it springs a leak, it is what it is. But I am going to do a fluid change. So the LSDs want 75W140, so I got some royal purple because I had it at the local O'Reilly's. Yeah, they're all different. This one's a 14, not a 17. So as always open the fill before the drain, because if this one doesn't come out, you do not want to drain your fluid. And this might be difficult, because this is a seized, this was a rusty, crusty diff. There we go. I got it propped up on some wood here. Oh yeah. Some old, probably original gear oil. So I gotta get the old crush washer off. It just deteriorated. These are original, I think. Look at that. Just completely broke. New crush washer, and torque it down to 52 foot-pounds. There we go. And there we have it. Now it's time to put this crusty boat anchor in the car. So before we put this in case you weren't sure the difference between a non-LSD and an LSD, first off, the tag will have an S before the ratio. So for example, this says S 3.23. A open will just say 3.23. But then if you want by hand, if you want to do this, these will not spin in different directions. It'll only spin together, both the axle shaft ports. Now if we go over to an open, I'll show you the difference. Now you see here an open, you can spin these different ways. So both the left and the right shaft can spin against each other. They won't spin together uniformly. It is time to get this bad boy in. Get that front up first until the bracket is pretty much up in the subframe. And then, okay, well, I'll get all the rust out of here. You also want to make sure you hook up the rear speed sensor before you go too high here. Alright, so that's all the bolts lined up. You just gotta kind of look at them and check them out as you go. It's not too difficult. Once the diff is kind of in place, it's all pretty easy. Diff is up and torqued down to spec. One thing off my garage floor, one thing off our list. So now we have to hook up the axles, which if you remember, I mangled every single axle bolt. So I have a set of new ones, well not new, but refurbished, that I pulled off my other axles that I hoard, and I de-rusted them and I picked the ones that are the least stripped, so they're all perfectly good. Torque these down, 71 foot-pounds is what the manual says. All right, axles are all torqued. Now let's get that drive shaft in. So something that gets forgotten often is a new CV joint gasket. This is what holds all the grease in here. And this will also cause some clunking if it goes really bad, because then you'll kind of have a little bit of a gap between your drive shaft and your diff. So this is a good thing to replace, often forgotten. So got some fresh grease packed in here. It's just a disaster. It's a disgusting mess. Get that gasket in, and the grease should kind of hold it in place. And we are all done. Drive shaft is hooked back into the diff. So everything back here is all set and ready to go. Now we just have to wait to put the engine in and the transmission in. And we can hook back up the drive shaft, and then we are all set. The rest of the stuff back here is suspension stuff that will come in the suspension episode. So we will return down here soon enough, but not until that engine's in. There we have it. We have concluded another episode, episode 4, I believe. Our ZF is fully resealed, redone, ready to go in. Our LSD is installed, so now we have a nice limited slip differential, no more open, and a lower ratio to complement the 5-speed, obviously. We got our refreshed drive shaft installed and ready to go. And if you can maybe see, yeah, I think you can see, we have the HREs fitted in the rear. This will come in the suspension episode. Like I said, got bored one day waiting on parts, so I fitted the rear suspension and the HREs. And let's just say I love it, but we'll get into that later. Again, if you guys are watching and you're wondering what I was wearing to see under there, this is the Odelphi headlamp. I have a discount code, Josh E34. If you want one, gets you 10% off. Just a little thing I throw out there. Thing comes in absolute handy when you're doing stuff under the car, so it's an absolute lifesaver. But thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Could not forget all the Driveline components. And in the next episode, I promise we're going to be putting this engine in. I'm still waiting on my freaking exhaust manifold gaskets. FedEx has screwed me and has held them up in Ohio for like a week now. So hopefully that figures itself out, because I'm getting very antsy to finish up this swap. So I'll see you guys in that next episode whenever the time finally comes. And yeah, peace out.